David was the kind of person who lived by routine. Every morning at 7, he would wake up, make his coffee, and sit by his small apartment window reading the newspaper. He worked at a local bank, counting numbers and filling out forms. His life was simple, predictable, and exactly the way he liked it. That quiet Tuesday morning started like any other. David was sipping his coffee when he heard the moving truck outside. Someone new was moving into apartment B, right next to his. He watched from his window as the movers carried boxes and furniture up the stairs. Nothing unusual about that. People moved in and out of the building all the time. But then she appeared. The woman was different from anyone David had ever seen. She had this calm way of moving, like she knew exactly where she was going and what she was doing. When she looked up at the building, her eyes seemed to take in everything at once. There was something about her that made David feel both curious and nervous at the same time. Later that day, David met her in the hallway. She was carrying a small plant in a blue pot. "Hi there," she said with a warm smile. "I'm your new neighbor. Just moved into B." "I'm David," he replied, trying to sound friendly. "Welcome to the building." "Thank you. I have a feeling this place will be quite interesting," she said. And there was something in her voice that made David wonder what she meant by that. Her name was Luna, and she seemed to have this unusual ability to make people feel comfortable around her within just a few days. David found himself looking forward to their brief conversations in the hallway or by the mailboxes. But then strange things started happening. It began with small things. David had been having trouble with his old laptop for weeks. Every time he tried to work on it, the screen would freeze or the programs would crash. One morning, while talking to Luna about his weekend plans, he found himself thinking about how nice it would be if his laptop just worked properly for once. The next day, his laptop was running perfectly, not just better, but like it was brand new. David couldn't understand it. He hadn't done anything to fix it. He hadn't even turned it on since yesterday. Maybe it just needed some rest, Luna had said when he mentioned it to her, but there was that same knowing look in her eyes. Then there was the incident with his boss. David had been working late every day for 2 weeks because his supervisor kept giving him extra projects. David was tired and frustrated, but he never complained. He just did his work and went home exhausted. One evening, while chatting with Luna in the building's small garden, David found himself thinking about how much easier his life would be if his boss would just give him a break. Not anything bad, just maybe a day or two where he wouldn't pile on more work. The very next morning, David's boss called in sick. Then he was sick for 3 more days. When he finally came back to work, he seemed different, more relaxed. He even told David to take it easy and not work so hard. David started paying attention to these coincidences. Every time he had a wishful thought while Luna was round, something related to that thought would happen. When he wished the noisy dog upstairs would quiet down, the dog's owner suddenly decided to take it to training classes. When he thought about how nice it would be to find a $20 bill on the ground, he found exactly that amount in his jacket pocket the next morning. At first, David thought he was just having a lucky week, but the incidents kept happening, and they were too specific to be random. There was definitely a pattern, and Luna was always somehow connected to it. One Saturday afternoon, David was sitting in the building's small lobby reading a book when Luna joined him. She sat in the chair across from him and smiled. "You've been thinking a lot lately," she said quietly. David looked up from his book. "What do you mean?" "People's thoughts have energy," Luna explained. "Some people think loudly, others think quietly. You, David, think very clearly. Your thoughts have a special kind of focus." David felt a chill run down his spine. "Are you saying you can read my mind?" Luna laughed softly. "Not exactly, but I can sense when someone is thinking strong thoughts, especially thoughts about wanting things to change, and those changes just happen to occur." David asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "Sometimes the universe likes to respond to clear intentions," Luna said, "especially when those intentions come from a good place." David closed his book and looked at her carefully. "So you're telling me that when I wish for something while you're around, It actually happens? I'm not telling you anything, Luna said with that mysterious smile. I'm just making conversation with my neighbor. But David knew there was more to it than that. Over the next few days, he started testing his theory. He would think small, harmless thoughts when Luna was nearby, and sure enough, they would manifest. In some way, when he wished for sunny weather, the clouds cleared. When he thought about how good a pizza would taste, his favorite pizza place called to tell him he won a free pizza in a contest. He didn't remember entering. Each time something like this happened, David would look for Luna, and she would always be somewhere nearby, sometimes watching him with that knowing expression. David began to realize that his quiet, predictable life was about to become something entirely different. Luna had brought something magical into his world, and he wasn't sure if he was ready for where it might lead. David couldn't sleep that night. He kept thinking about his conversation with Luna and all the strange things that had been happening. Was it really possible that his thoughts were somehow becoming real? It seemed impossible, but the evidence was right there in front of him. The next morning, David decided to be more careful about what he thought when Luna was around. He didn't want to accidentally wish for something that might cause problems. But as he got ready for work, he found himself wondering what would happen if he tested this power more deliberately. During his lunch break, David sat in the small park near his office building. He had brought a notebook and started writing down everything he could remember about the past few days. The laptop fixing itself, his boss getting sick, finding the $20, the pizza contest he never entered. Each incident had happened within 24 hours of him having a specific thought. While Luna was nearby, as he wrote, David noticed Luna walking across the park. She was carrying a small bag and seemed to be heading toward the bench where he was sitting. David quickly closed his notebook and tried to look casual. Mind if I sit here? Luna asked, pointing to the other end of the bench. Of course not, David replied, his heart beating a little faster. Luna sat down and pulled out a sandwich from her bag. Beautiful day, isn't it? Perfect weather for eating lunch outside. David nodded, but inside his mind was racing. He decided to try a small experiment while looking at Luna. He thought very clearly about how nice it would be if a friendly dog would come by and brighten their day. Nothing harmful, just something pleasant. Within 5 minutes, a woman with a golden retriever walked past their bench. The dog immediately pulled toward David and Luna, wagging its tail enthusiastically. The owner apologized and tried to pull the dog away, but Luna smiled and said it was fine. He's beautiful, Luna said, petting the dog. What's his name? This is Buddy, the owner replied. He's usually shy around strangers, but he seems to really like you both. After the woman and her dog left, David stared at Luna. That was interesting timing. He said carefully, dogs are good judges of character, Luna replied, taking another bite of her sandwich. They can sense when people have good intentions. David decided to push a little further. What if someone's intentions weren't just good, but actually had some kind of effect on the world around them? Luna looked at him for a long moment. That would be quite a responsibility, wouldn't it? It would, David agreed, but it would also be incredible. That evening, David began what he privately called his research project. He started keeping detailed notes about his thoughts and what happened afterward. He was careful to only think about small, positive things that wouldn't hurt anyone. When he thought about his elderly neighbor having a good day, he saw her the next morning with a big smile, telling everyone that her grandson had called her unexpectedly. When he wished for his favorite coffee shop to have a good day, he found out later that they had sold out of everything by noon because they were so busy. David began to realize that this wasn't just about getting things for himself. His thoughts seemed to have the power to make good things happen for other people, too. It was like he had been given some kind of magical ability to spread positive energy into the world. But the more he experimented, the more questions he had. How did this work? Was it really Luna who was making this happen? Or was it something else entirely? And most importantly, were there any limits to what he could think into existence? One evening, David was feeling particularly confident about his newfound ability. He had spent the day thinking small, positive thoughts and watching them come true. His coworker had found a parking spot right in front of the building after David wished for her to have good luck. The cafeteria had served David's favorite soup after he thought about how good it would taste. As he walked home from work, David saw Luna watering plants in the building's small garden. He decided to try something bigger than usual. Instead of thinking about small coincidences, he thought about receiving some kind of recognition at work. Nothing too dramatic. Just maybe his boss noticing his hard work and saying something nice about it. "Good evening, David," Luna said, looking up from her plants. "How was your day?" "It was good," David replied, but he was focusing on his thought about work recognition. "I've been thinking about my job a lot lately." Luna stopped watering and looked at him with a more serious expression than usual. "Thinking can be powerful," she said quietly. "Sometimes we get exactly what we focus on." The next morning, David's boss called him into his office. David's heart pounded as he walked down the hallway. Had he thought too big? Was he in trouble? But instead of bad news, his boss smiled and told David that he had been recommended for a special project that would give him more responsibility and a small raise. Apparently, several people had mentioned David's dedication and positive attitude. Around the office, David left the meeting feeling excited, but also a little scared. This was the biggest thing that had happened since he started noticing the pattern. It proved that his thoughts really could change his life in significant ways. That evening, David found Luna in the hallway and told her about his promotion. She smiled, but David noticed something different in her expression. She looked tired, and there were dark circles under her eyes that hadn't been there before. "Congratulations," Luna said. "I'm sure you'll do great with your new responsibilities." "Are you feeling all right?" David asked. "You look like you might be tired." "I've been having trouble sleeping lately," Luna admitted. "Sometimes helping others can be more exhausting than people realize." David felt a strange chill when she said that, for the first time. He wondered if there might be a cost to all these good things happening to him, but he pushed the thought away. Everything had been so positive, so wonderful. What could be wrong with making good things happen? As he went to sleep that night, David was already planning what he might think about tomorrow. David woke up the next morning feeling like he had discovered a secret superpower. The promotion at work had proven that his thoughts could create real, meaningful changes in his life. As he got ready for his first day in his new position, he couldn't help but think about what else might be possible. At work, David found himself in a completely different environment. His new office had a window, and his responsibilities were much more interesting than his old job. During his lunch break, he called his mother to tell her about the promotion. "That's wonderful, honey," his mother said. "I always knew you had potential. Your father would be so proud." David's father had passed away 2 years ago, and his mother had been struggling with loneliness ever since. As David listened to her voice, he found himself thinking about how nice it would be if she could find some new friends, or maybe join a club where she could meet people who shared her interests. That evening, David made sure to bump into Luna in the hallway. He had been thinking about his mother all day, hoping that something good would happen to help her feel less alone. "You seem happy today," Luna observed as they walked toward the mailboxes together. "I am," David replied. "I was just thinking about my mother and how I wish she could find some new friends. She's been pretty lonely since my father died." Luna nodded thoughtfully. "Loneliness can be very difficult. I'm sure the universe has a way of bringing the right people into her life." The next day, David's mother called him with excitement in her voice. She had decided to visit the local library, and while she was there, she met a group of women who had a weekly book club. They had invited her to join them, and she was thrilled to have found people who loved reading as much as she did. David was amazed. It had worked again, and this time it had helped someone he cared about deeply. He began to think bigger about what he might be able to accomplish. Over the next few weeks, David started making bolder wishes. When his downstairs neighbor complained about having trouble finding a job, David thought about how great it would be if the man could find work. That made him happy. Within a week, the neighbor had landed a job at a local bookstore, which was perfect because he loved to read. When David heard that his favorite local restaurant was struggling financially, he thought about how wonderful it would be if they suddenly got more customers. The next week, a food blogger discovered the restaurant and wrote a glowing review that brought in crowds of new diners. David felt like he was becoming a kind of guardian angel for everyone around him. But with each success, he noticed that Luna seemed to be getting more tired. She moved more slowly, and sometimes when they talked, she would need to sit down as if she was exhausted. One evening, David found Luna sitting on the front steps of their building. She was holding a cup of tea, but her hands were shaking slightly. "Luna, are you okay?" David asked, sitting down beside her. "I'm just tired," she said. But her voice was weaker than usual. "I haven't been sleeping well lately." David felt a pang of guilt, but he pushed it away. "Maybe you should see a doctor. You've been looking tired for weeks now." Luna smiled sadly. "Some things can't be fixed by doctors." That night, David lay in bed thinking about Luna's words. He was concerned about her health, but he was also excited about a new idea. What if he could think about something really big happening for himself? Not just a small promotion or finding $20, but something that could change his entire life. The next morning, David decided to try his most ambitious thought yet. As he walked to work, he passed Luna in the lobby. She was checking her mail, but she looked so tired that she was leaning against the wall for support. "Good morning, Luna," David said cheerfully. "I hope you have a wonderful day." "Thank you, David," she replied, but she barely looked at him. As David walked to work, he concentrated on a single thought. He imagined himself becoming successful enough to help not just his friends and family, but lots of people. He thought about having enough money to donate to charities, to help his mother retire comfortably, and to make a real difference in the world. At work, David threw himself into his new responsibilities with more energy than ever before. He worked late every night, impressing his supervisors with his dedication and creativity. He started coming up with ideas that saved the bank money and brought in new customers. Within a month, David had been promoted again. This time, he was given his own team to manage and a salary that was double what he had been making before. His boss told him that he had never seen anyone advance so quickly in the company. David was thrilled, but when he got home that evening, he found Luna sitting in the building's garden. She was so pale that she looked almost ghostly in the evening light. "Luna, what's wrong?" David asked, rushing to her side. "I need to tell you something," Luna said quietly, "but I'm not sure you're ready to hear it." "Tell me," David said. Sitting down next to her, Luna took a deep breath. "The things that have been happening to you aren't coincidences, and they're not free gifts from the universe." David's heart started beating faster. "What do you mean?" "Every time one of your thoughts becomes real, it takes something from me," Luna explained. "It's like I'm paying the price for your good fortune." David stared at her in shock. "That's impossible. You're probably just stressed or overworked." "David, I'm telling you the truth," Luna said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've been carrying this burden for years, and I've been getting weaker every time I help someone. I thought maybe you would be different. I hoped you would realize what was happening and choose to stop. But why didn't you tell me sooner?" David asked, feeling panic rising in his chest. "Because I wanted to see if you were the kind of person who would figure it out on your own," Luna said. "I wanted to believe that someone would care more about my well-being than about getting everything they wanted." David felt like the ground was falling away beneath him. Everything he had gained, all his success and happiness, had come at Luna's expense. But even as he felt guilty, part of him wondered if she was telling the truth. Maybe she was just sick and looking for someone to blame. "I need time to think about this," David said, standing up quickly. As he walked away, David heard Luna whisper, "I hope you make the right choice." But David wasn't sure what the right choice was anymore. David couldn't sleep that night. He kept thinking about what Luna had told him. Was it really possible that his success was making her sick? Part of him wanted to believe it was just a coincidence. But deep down, he knew she was telling the truth. The next morning, David decided to test Luna's claim. He would avoid thinking any wishful thoughts for a few days and see if she started feeling better. It seemed like a simple enough experiment, but as David went about his day, he realized how difficult it was to control his thoughts. At work, when his computer started running slowly, his first instinct was to wish it would work faster. When he got stuck in traffic, he automatically thought about how nice it would be if the cars would move. When he saw a homeless person on the street, he found himself hoping the man would find help. David had to constantly remind himself not to think these thoughts. It was exhausting, and it made him realize just how much he had been relying on his power to make life easier. By the end of the week, David was frustrated and tired from trying to control his mind. He had managed to avoid making any big wishes, but he wasn't sure if he had been completely successful. And when he saw Luna in the hallway, she still looked pale and weak. "How are you feeling?" David asked, genuinely concerned. "A little better," Luna said, but her voice was still quiet. "Thank you for asking." David felt a small sense of relief. Maybe he had been successful in controlling his thoughts after all. But that relief was short-lived because David realized he missed the power terribly. Life felt harder and more frustrating without the ability to make good things happen. The following week, David faced a crisis at work. His team was behind on an important project, and his boss was putting pressure on him to find a solution. David worked late every night, but nothing seemed to be going right. His old self would have simply wished for everything to work out, but now he was trying to solve the problem through hard work alone. After 3 days of struggling, David was walking home feeling defeated and exhausted. He saw Luna sitting in the garden, reading a book. She looked better than she had in weeks. Her color was returning, and she seemed more alert. "You look like you've had a rough day," Luna said, looking up from her book. "Work has been challenging." David admitted, "I'm trying to solve a big problem, and nothing seems to be working." "Sometimes the best solutions come when we stop trying to force things," Luna said gently. "Maybe you just need to trust that things will work out naturally." David nodded, but inside, he was struggling with temptation. It would be so easy to just think one small thought about his work. Problem being solved. Luna was sitting right there, and she looked healthier now. Maybe one little wish wouldn't hurt her too much. As David stood there looking at Luna, he found himself thinking about how wonderful it would be if his project came together perfectly. He told himself it was just a fleeting thought, nothing serious, but even as he thought it, he felt guilty. The next morning, David woke up to a phone call from his coworker. She had stayed late the night before and discovered a solution to their problem that would save both time and money. The project was back on track, and their boss was thrilled. David felt excited about the good news, but he also felt sick to his stomach. He had broken his promise to himself, and he knew he had probably hurt Luna in the process. That evening, David went looking for Luna. He found her apartment door slightly open, and when he knocked, she called for him to come in. Luna was lying on her couch, looking even paler than before. "I'm sorry," David said immediately. "I thought about my work problem yesterday. I didn't mean for it to happen." Luna smiled weakly. "I know. I could feel it when it happened." "How does this work?" David asked, sitting down in the chair across from her. "How are you able to make thoughts become real?" Luna was quiet for a long moment. "I wasn't born with this ability," she finally said. "It was given to me by someone else, someone who wanted to be free of it." "Someone like me?" David asked. "Someone exactly like you," Luna confirmed. "Someone who discovered they could make their thoughts real, and who used that power until they realized what it was costing the person who made it possible." David felt a chill run down his spine. What happened to that person? He learned to control himself. Luna said, "But by then, I was already too weak to live a normal life. I've been searching for someone who could take this burden from me, but I needed to find someone who truly understood what it meant." "You mean someone who would be willing to sacrifice their own desires to help you," David said. "Yes, Luna. whispered, someone who would choose compassion over power. David looked at Luna lying on the couch, weak and exhausted from making his dreams come true. He thought about all the good things that had happened to him over the past few months. His promotion, his mother's happiness, his financial success. All of it had come at the cost of Luna's health and strength. "I want to help you," David said. "But I don't know how." "There's a way," Luna said. "But it would mean giving up everything you've gained, your promotions, your success, even your ability to make future wishes come true. Everything would go back to the way it was before we met." David felt his heart sink. The thought of losing everything he had worked for was terrifying. But as he looked at Luna, so weak she could barely sit up, he knew what he had to do. "Tell me what I need to do," David said. But even as he said the words, part of him was hoping she would say it was impossible. Luna looked at David with eyes full of both hope and sadness. "Are you sure you want to know? Once I tell you, there's no going back to pretending this isn't real." David took a deep breath. "I'm sure. I can't keep living like this knowing that I'm hurting you. The transfer can only happen if someone willingly takes on the burden." Luna explained, "But it's not just about saying yes. You have to truly want to help others more than you want to help yourself. And you have to prove it through your actions." "What do you mean?" David asked. "You have to use your power one last time," Luna said. "But instead of thinking about what you want, you have to think only about healing and helping others. You have to fix all the damage that has been done. And you have to do it knowing that each thought will make me weaker." David felt his stomach drop. "But if I keep making wishes, won't that make you even sicker?" "Yes," Luna said quietly. "But it's the only way to break the cycle. You have to choose to hurt me in order to help others, and you have to do it with pure intentions. Only then can the power be transferred." David stood up and walked to the window. Outside, life was continuing normally. People were walking their dogs, children were playing in the park, and everyone seemed happy and carefree. They had no idea that in this small apartment, two people were discussing something that seemed impossible. "What happens to you if I do?" This David asked, still looking out the window. "I don't know," Luna admitted. "I might get better once the burden is lifted, or I might be too weak to recover. The person who gave this to me never told me what would happen to them afterward." David turned back to face her. "And what happens to me? You'll have the same burden I've carried." Luna said, "You'll be able to make other people's thoughts come true, but each time you do, it will drain your energy. You'll spend the rest of your life looking for someone compassionate enough to take it from you." The weight of this decision felt crushing. David had spent weeks enjoying the power to make his dreams come true, and now he was being asked to give it up and take on a burden that could last for years or even decades. But as he looked at Luna, so weak she could barely keep her eyes open, David knew he couldn't live with himself if he walked away. "Tell me what to do," David said. Luna smiled for the first time in weeks. "Sit down and think about everyone who has been affected by your wishes. Think about healing and helping them, one by one. But you have to mean it completely. You can't have any selfish thoughts mixed in." David sat down and closed his eyes. He started with his coworker who had been forced to solve his work problem. He thought about her getting recognition for her hard work and receiving a promotion that she truly deserved. He felt a strange tingling sensation and heard Luna take a sharp breath. Next, David thought about his mother. Instead of just wishing for her to be happy, he thought about her finding genuine friendships and discovering new interests that would bring her joy for years to come. Again, he felt the tingling sensation and heard Luna's breathing become more labored. David continued with every person he could remember being affected by his wishes. His elderly neighbor, the man who had found a job at the bookstore, the restaurant owner who had struggled financially. For each person, David thought about long-term happiness and success that would last long after his power was gone. With each thought, David felt more tired, and he could hear Luna's breathing becoming more difficult. But he forced himself to continue. He thought about homeless people finding shelter, sick people getting better, and lonely people finding connection. Finally, David thought about Luna herself. He imagined her healthy and strong, free from the burden she had carried for so long. He thought about her having a normal life, making friends, and finding happiness without constantly worrying about other people's wishes. As David held this last thought, he felt a strange sensation throughout his entire body. It was like electricity was flowing through him, but instead of energizing him, it was draining him. He opened his eyes and saw Luna sitting up straighter than she had in weeks. "Is it working?" David asked, his voice weaker than before. "Yes," Luna said, and her voice was stronger. "I can feel the burden lifting." "But David, are you sure you want to finish this? Once the transfer is complete, you'll be responsible for this power until you can find someone else to take it." David looked at Luna, who was already looking healthier. Her color was returning, and her eyes were brighter. "I'm sure," he said. "Then think one more thought," Luna said. "Think about accepting this responsibility willingly, with the understanding that you'll use it to help others and never for yourself." David closed his eyes and thought about taking on Luna's burden. He thought about spending his life making other people's dreams come true, even if it meant sacrificing his own energy and health. He thought about the responsibility of finding someone compassionate enough to eventually take it from him. As he held this thought, David felt the last of his energy drain away, but at the same time, he felt a strange sense of peace. He had made the right choice. When David opened his eyes, Luna was standing up. She looked like a completely different person. Her color was normal, her eyes were bright, and she was smiling. "Thank you," she said, tears in her eyes. "You have no idea what you've given me." "I think I do," David replied, though he felt exhausted. Over the next few days, David learned to live with his new reality. He could feel when people around him were having strong thoughts about wanting things to change. His elderly neighbor hoped her garden would grow better. A child in the park wished his lost toy would be found. A woman at the coffee shop hoped she would hear good news about a job interview. Each time David sensed these thoughts, he had a choice. He could make them come true. But each time he did, he felt a little weaker. He understood now what Luna had gone through, and he promised himself he would use this power carefully. David also began to understand that this wasn't just about sacrifice. It was about learning to find happiness in helping others rather than in getting things for himself. For the first time in his life, David felt like he was living with true purpose, and someday, when he found someone else who was ready to learn this lesson, he would pass the burden on to them. But until then, David was content to be the person who made other people's dreams come true, one thought at a time.